Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SEO Fight Club. Um, just waiting for the YouTube chat to show up, and it's being slow again. Oh, and I am sharing the wrong screen. Let me go ahead and fix that now.
Now you have to stare off into space.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so share screen, the actual slide deck. All right. And let's refresh, see if we can get that YouTube chat going. Here it is. Oh, and there's a new changes to YouTube thing over it. Awesome. All right, so I close that. We say hello and ask questions. So sometimes we don't get to everybody's questions. So if you have questions you'd like to have answered, be sure to ask them early to ensure they get in time. And let me pop out the chat. And let me make sure I'm getting the live chat messages so we don't lose any. All right. So once again, we are going to take a look at the Google Leaks stuff. Not a lot of it. Mainly wanted to kind of see if there was some flavor in the leaks around like topical focus and topicality and these types of things because we often talk about them, we experiment with them, but we've never had any good leaks about them. You know, it was always a hunch that if they were working with entities that there would be scores to see, you know, how much about apple pie is page A versus page B, and that they're probably scoring in some fashion. And so I wanted to look for evidence of that within the leak. And so that's what I kind of did. But to get through the boilerplate, and let me double check one other thing here because I stopped looking at the participant list. Okay. First thing I want to mention, Magic PR. If you need press releases, kind of important. Um, Next thing I want to mention is I recently told everyone about a webinar where Anand revealed his new Kora AI technology. If you missed that announcement, or if you weren't able to attend the webinar, there is a replay at this URL. It is only useful really for people who use Quora, or at least people who are interested in, you know, what's kind of cutting edge for Quora. So that's what it's about. If you don't care about Quora, feel free to skip it. Um, all right. I also want to remind people we had Derek Booth on the show last week, and a lot of people were asking about where his SaaS business is. And so it's the marketingbrain.io. And he had a discount code. I forgot it off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you asked Derek Booth, he will happily connect you with the right coupon code for that discount. And it's a good way of using your pay-per-click campaigns for keyword research. So not only does it help you avoid wasted ad spend in your own campaigns, it can tell you which keywords are worth SEOing because you make money with them, and that then makes them worth targeting. So if you don't know if your keywords that you're doing SEO for make money, that's kind of a big problem because the ones that do make money are way more important than the ones that don't.
So I'm going to tell you, I was
All
on I was talking with Derek actually before I jumped on Fight Club, And we're talking a little bit about the marketing brain and some other things that he has going on. So along with this, he has in development some PPC training that's up to date, and some of the stuff that's working really, really well now for people. And there's some interesting capabilities that he has inside of the marketing brain that he didn't talk about here. So if you're going to get into the pay-per-click space and you're going to try to manage your PPC stuff along with your SEO stuff, this is a tool that's really worth taking a hard look at because it can make your life a whole lot easier. Derek built his tool for the same reason that I built we built the link building tool that we have, and that was because he needed something that made his day-to-day work faster to manage all the different campaigns and clients and things like that he has. So I'd say take a look at this if you're interested in getting into that space, or if you're already in that space, take a look.
Yeah, and just FYI, when I have pay-per-click questions, Derek is the first person I go to. So just so you know the nature. But all right, into our topic. So we're kind of looking for topicality. And so one of the first things I found in there was this focus entity. Surprise, surprise. There's something they monitor called a focus entity. And uh, for lexicon articles like Wikipedia pages, a document is often about a certain entity. This is the local entity ID of the focus entity for the document. So imagine if your entities on page were wrong and it gave you the wrong focus entity. I could imagine that causing a lot of problems.
Well, it also makes
Um,
sense that when you do a keyword search, part of the systems map the search to a particular focus entity to identify the documents that could potentially answer the question or satisfy the search being asked. So you want to make sure that your page does have the correct focus entity for the reasons you were talking about, Ted. That's a big one in terms of looking at entities involved for the win.
this next one is a little bit more cryptic to me. Maybe we can make some sense of it, but centrality. So measures how topical this term is to a particular signal. A term like Lincoln in the Abraham Lincoln's Wikipedia page should have a centrality close to 1.0, while non-central terms like Florida should have a centrality close to 0. So it's kind of like it is kind of like a focus. How close to the bullseye are you, maybe? What do you think?
Well, in a knowledge graph, when you look at distance between entities and number of hops, number of traversals, things like that, where you're measuring distance between those two, this is basically saying, is it closely related to this topic? Or when I'm talking about Abraham Lincoln and the word Florida comes out, there's nothing there that connects those two things together, so the number should be closer to 0. So it might be just some summary distance on a knowledge graph between these two entities.
So here we have the repository WebRef entity name score, and it represents a score for an entity. So every entity they recognize, I guess they're scoring for the page.
Mm-hmm.
And then a confidence, uh, confidence that this name is a trusted name of the entity. A reasonable threshold for name trust is 0.6. A name can be trusted and still have a very low score ratio, especially if it is ambiguous. Mercury is the example, and or not the dominant interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So that one seems cryptic to me, but I guess they're trying to make sure that it's the entity reference is actually the entity and not some other kind of reference or synonym.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense when they're talking about, so if you have an entity like Mercury, is it that, are we talking about the planet? Are we talking about the element? Are we talking about the book written by Charles Taylor? Are we talking about the album recorded by Terry Power? Which Mercury are we talking about? So when they're looking at that particular entity on a page, they're trying to figure out which of these, entities named Mercury is the correct one, and the confidence that they've identified it correctly.
Yep.
I think, and Ted, this is probably your point. That goes back to, I guess, 2 items ago that you showed, where it was that related score. I forget the term it was used, but it gave a score as to how much is this related to this. And I've always instructed folks that when you're writing, you need to give Google context. And Mercury is a great example. Are we talking about Mercury the element, Mercury the planet, Mercury the Greek god? But if I had an article about Mercury and I was mentioning space, orbit, if I mentioned the sun, if I mentioned solar system, they know immediately, okay, I'm talking about Mercury the planet, not Mercury, the album, or Mercury whatever else.
Yeah, and their second example, Siberian Husky, which we all kind of know is a dog, but here they're giving an MID of a book that's called Siberian Husky.
Right.
All right, let's see. Next one. Score. There is an absolute score of that entity, and the score equals something they call artificial score plus a volume-based score. And I thought that was interesting because it kind of implies how much you use the entity,
It's a frequency
the volume of it. Yeah. So that we can't be sure that's what that means, but I thought it was interesting enough that we should ponder it. Score ratio, the ratio between the entity score and the total score over all entities. This is including the open world information if it was estimated. So I don't know what that means, but again, they're doing ratios.
Well, that's a percentage thing. So if we've clearly identified 10 entities on the page, and we've given each of the entities a score, and so the score, let's say there's 86 points or something like that, and this particular entity is 7 of those points, that is a fraction. That's 9% of the total score for all entities. So that contributes 9% to their understanding of the page, for example. But I don't know about the second one. This is including open world information. You'd have to know what open world information was.
Yep.
But it's more of a how important is this entity to the overall page, is what it looks like.
And then we have an encoded entity prior score, the highest entity prior seen for the document's headline. That's what caught my attention. And single topic entities. Represents the probability that a query is fringe. And so that kind of killed my happiness at a moment because it's talking about the search query here. So is this more about the search query than the document? But it did talk about the headline. So maybe this is talking about the presentation, the anchor text in search being the headline, and seeing if the search query and the headlines have some kind of agreement. And that's interesting if that's the case, because we have seen on occasions where how Google presents your search result anchor text can impact your rankings. And so we've seen that from time to time where there would be these, these seasons of title rewriting where, including an extra word could have a big impact on how you rank. So this one's interesting, but still highly cryptic.
Yeah, especially when you have to go see the topicality score, talk about entity topicalities, then you've got to look at the fringe query, prior encoding, decode API. There's a whole lot going on here that you'd have to speculate about.
Yeah, and there was a great deal more in the leaks on this topical area. I only managed to scratch the surface to pull these slides together today. So I think there's probably a lot more evidence in there, but I was limited on time. So this is what I have. But what I'd like to do is to ask you guys what your experience has been with topical focus. What kind of mistakes have you seen, and what do you kind of do to keep it on point? So, Lee, I'll start with you because I know you know a lot about topical focus.
Well, so here's the thing. Collectively, what we thought and what the data that you've shown here, indicates is when Google looks at a document, they're trying to figure out what's the topic, what's the entity, what are the central entity, what are the related entities, to kind of figure out what's your page about. And they're taking that through a lot of different scores to figure out, oh, okay, this page is about, apple pie. It's not about cute and fuzzy kittens, so they're figuring that out mathematically, which is nice. But it also indicates that they're doing some weightings in there, which is what you would expect, because if on a particular page I'm spending time talking half the page about apple pie and half the page talking about cute and fuzzy kittens that are sitting in the kitchen with me watching me make the apple pie, one's a calico and one's a this and one's a that, what's the topic of the page? Is my page about pie, or is it about kittens? And this sort of indicates that it's trying to figure out not only what are all the entities, what's the central entity, what's the main topic, and how closely the other shit is related to it, like Lincoln and Florida. And so, my experience in testing is that, yeah, if you can drift off topic by the inclusion of the wrong entities on a page, you can start ranking for other things or start getting impressions for other keywords that you don't want. And I think the best example of that is one that you've talked about a lot of time, which is your SEMrush situation when you had that problem. So if you want to, that's a good share in terms of understanding what Google does.
Yeah. So there's a couple areas where we kind of see topical focus, and one is most commonly described as when an electrician talks about his grandson's little league game, and the more he talks about his grandson, the more it becomes a little league page versus an electrician page. Another aspect of that same thing is kind of when SEOs do local SEO and they're tuning for Seattle plumber, and they make the word mentions about 50% Seattle and 50% plumber, and that's way too much Seattle. Now you've kind of made it a Seattle page, because a Seattle plumber page would have a balance to it that's more like 90% plumber, 10% Seattle. And the example that Lee was mentioning, this was for the Top SEO Factors website. It was obviously SEO'd for Top SEO Factors, and it wasn't ranking. It wasn't even coming into the top 100. And I started wondering why. Why isn't the standard playbook working here? And that's an important question, because if we have these fundamental forces, they're tested in single variable testing, we have anecdotal evidence, they all work for many, many people. why on my site alone does that standard playbook not work? And so I decided to get more information. I went into Search Console to see what keywords I was getting search impressions for. And it was a long list of SEMrush keywords. And I was like, what the heck? It's like 400 or 500 different SEMrush keywords. And my first thought is SEMrush isn't going to be happy about that. And my second thought is, how on earth does that even happen? And so I went back to the page and I looked at it, and in the data table for the SEO factors, there were 2 that mentioned SEMrush. I took those 2 factors off of the page, and boom, shot like a rocket for top SEO factors. It's like there's a subsystem that's looking at your entities saying, you know, I know you want to rank for top SEO factors, but we have a lot of demand for SEMrush terms that we don't have a lot of good resources to show. And so we would really feel better showing your page for those SEMrush keywords. And so there's some subsystem in Google that's occasionally doing that. And the only way you can diagnose it is through Search Console. You have to see those searches that you shouldn't be getting, and you need to recognize when it's at a point that you have to detune the page for that term in order to get Google to behave properly. And it's fairly uncommon. I won't call it rare. I've seen it 4 or 5 times now, but it happens maybe 2, 3 times a year. It's not an everyday thing. So yeah, definitely there. What about you, Charles? Have you ever seen SEO issues on somewhere around staying on topic?
Yes, that's actually very common with articles, with news articles, that the person writing, they're trying to put their own angle, their own kind of slant on the article, and what they invariably do is they end up talking too much about the other things, or you end up on this like rabbit trail where you start talking about Angelina Jolie's marriage, and then you end up talking about, adoption from foreign countries or something strange like that. One of the guidance we've always given people is everyone has to have a topic sentence at the beginning of all their articles. And I ask them for each paragraph in their article, they need to go back and say, is this supporting your topic sentence? Because if it's not, you're getting off topic. I'm not here to tell people what to write about, but I am saying if you're going to write about Angelina Jolie, you got to keep it on topic. And if it's about Angelina Jolie adopting a child from Africa or something like that, that's fine. Then that's what that article needs to be about. You can mention other things, and it's actually good to mention other things, but it's all got to be in support of that primary topic.
Yep. What about you, Terry?
I've certainly seen it when clients ask about why something's not ranking as well as they think it should be, or is ranking for, like in your case, something it probably shouldn't be at all. One thing people can do to prevent making those mistakes, go to their favorite generative AI writer, ask it for, put in your keyword and say, give me a sitemap for a website about this topic, and then ask for an outline for a book about that topic. Then you'll get 2 lists. You can compare and contrast them and have on-topic information that make sure your content, if you have gaps, you can fill them in. If you go way off on something else, on adoption for Angela Jolie, or your Siberian Husky, you're talking about, my nickname growing up in Mongolia, whatever. But that's what I do. Get a couple lists of topical content around my keyword, and then say, this is what you need to use.
That makes a lot of sense. And there are also some techniques for giving an article to AI and asking it about its topics and the balance of topics. All good things. So let's go to some questions here. There's a few we missed from past episodes. Let's see, one person said, as a photographer, I'd like to see a deep dive in image SEO. That was in response to the Google leaks. So that would be a good one to do. I have a number of slides for that. But I would want to coordinate it with Lee and Honey, our resident image SEO experts. Let's see. Let's see, what do we have here? Let's see, someone says, please keep delving into the leaks. At a minimum, it creates interesting theories and discussion points. I agree.
And testing opportunities.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see. We have a question for Charles. That works fine for news, but it frustrates feature-oriented coverage. And so I don't know much about that.
I'm not sure what they mean by that.
It's a PR reference going to a news SEO reference, so it might be cross-industry lingo. I don't know if it's wrong or not because I don't know enough about those industries. Is the use of the word local significant to local search? It could be. It often is, but not always.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of times, I was going to say, a lot of times in programming, you have local and global variables, and that's fairly common in the variable naming conventions. And I understand that, when Google's looking at it, is it a local, as in a local business type of term as well. So there is some ambiguity sometimes in the leaks when you're looking at a local variable about, whether it's about a small or a business located somewhere, or whether it's about a variable's position in the code. Go ahead, Charles. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say local made me think about something. Looking at these Google leaks, get used to the terms that Google uses and how they use them. So local is a great example. Look, Google in the leaks, Google references local anchors quite a bit and local links. And when they say local links, now my mind automatically goes to local SEO. What they mean is a link or an anchor on that page or from that site, and it seems to vary based upon the context. So I think one thing to think about when delving into these leaks is you have to kind of get into Google's mindset about the words and the terminology they use. I would also recommend that when you find one of these leaks that you like, let's just say a leak about local anchors, you'll see it always references a module. Search that module next. Like you kind of in a spider web can go out and start saying, well, what do they mean by this? And you check that. What do they mean by that? And then you can check that. You can very easily fall down a rabbit hole. So make a note of where you start and maybe even the first couple of things you search, but you can start finding a lot more about a subject and understanding better context what Google's trying to do with either that module or where that specific item.
Yep, and Robert Portillo is asking a question for Charles. We're having a problem with the schema where the schema validator is validating the schema as perfect, but Google Search Console reports errors and warnings. What can be done?
So we've had that exact same thing. So these are weird edge cases because it doesn't happen a lot, but there are certain things. I would always recommend. So what I do when our QA folks check everything, I have everybody check using the validator. But I also have them checking using the rich snippets tool, because the rich snippets tool will return the same errors that Google Search Console returns. And yeah, there are a few things where they'll give you warnings and errors that the validator will not. It's not a lot, but they're there. They're there.
Yeah, we've found in certain types of schema, especially in local, is a good example of this. People that deal with local schema, that the HTML spec, the schema spec, will allow certain things as optional. And in Google's case, sometimes they require those things. So they have their own rules that are separate from and a deviation from. So, you might go through a schema validator and it goes, this is perfect, but you're missing some required fields that are optional for the one validator that are required for Google. So they'll, throw up the error flags on stuff like that. So that is a good way of checking that, is to go use both tools and see if both of them clear it. Because we've also seen where Google has cleared it on both of those, and then you throw it in, and then there's a misread by Googlebot, which will spit up an error which isn't actually there. We've also seen that edge case.
So I was just going to say, you mentioned Googlebot, that it's pretty safe to use the rich snippets tool, because that uses the same bot that Search Console end up using. But those bots may not be the exact same version bot that Google's using to crawl regularly, like Lee just pointed out. So if you want to know more about that stuff, go check out Carolyn Holzman's Crawl No Crawl. She's got all that data, and she'll let everybody know when things change.
Let's see. Derek asks, I'm struggling figuring out what I need to improve SEO-wise for an on-page and technical on my small e-com site. How do I go about hiring someone trustworthy to help out this solo entrepreneur? I would recommend that you get probably an audit. And if it's a big enough business, you would want to get several audits and see where they agree and disagree, and try to get a number of opinions on the situation, because one expert is going to give you opinions about what they're really good about, and another expert might be good with other aspects, and they'll give you opinions on those. So if the business is failing and time is of the essence and they're not going to make payroll, what you really need is multiple opinions quickly. If that's not the case, then you can kind of take your time and be more cautious with your spending, and you can kind of interview people and try to find the most well-rounded expert that can do the technical and standard SEO evaluation. But the truth is that we'll never know what you need until we hunt for the problem. And hunting for the problem can take 40 hours to do. So there's, there is a chance that someone could look at your site and see it in 15 minutes. That happens pretty commonly, but there is also a chance that someone could look at your site for 40 hours and not figure out what it is. And so nobody can guarantee that they'll find and fix the problem. The best an SEO could ever do is try. And it takes time, and they like to get paid for their time trying, because they could get paid doing other work instead. So if they have to stop making money to help you out, it would be good if they got paid to do it. And so that's kind of the nature of the situation. So picking someone out, you'd want to know how technical they are at the technical aspects of SEO. Can they spot a misconfigured server? Do they understand what those error messages mean in the console and how they might impact SEO? So those would be important things, because oftentimes the SEO issues are self-inflicted. So you would want somebody that can, identify when is it a negative SEO attack, when is it something that got deployed by the developers, When is it actually an SEO tactical problem on the page, but everything else is okay? When is it Google's fault? When is Googlebot getting into things it shouldn't? So log file analysis. Those are the things you want to ask about for an audit, because those are the places people need to look to try to find the problem. What do you think, Lee?
I'm going to come at it a little bit differently. When I listen to your description, I understand the answer that you're giving, and given your background in ecom at an enterprise level, that's where you find most of the stuff. Where you're looking for. And you mentioned this. You're gonna go to your strengths and stuff like that. For me, a lot of times when we look at sites, a couple of quick looks and Search Console, a couple of core reports, just gathering some general data, because it depends. Are you starting to rank for certain things, or is it a ghost town? Because those would lead you down very different paths. If you've got nothing going on despite what you were doing, then I'm more likely to look at a technical thing. And if I can't uncover something really, really quickly on that, I would refer you to somebody that's extraordinarily technical, depending on what we find. Other things, it might be that your site is perfect and you might need some links, or your on page is not good enough to rank as competitively as you want. So, what's your starting point? And a lot of times that is just a quick set of eyeballs. And sometimes, as Ted said, 15 minutes, you can say, all right, here's kind of the neighborhood where the problem is looks like it's located. And, here's the angle of attack to sort of investigate that further or solve it. So, a lot of times there are, technical issues, but, a lot of times it's just straight up, your SEO lacks in some form or fashion, and addressing those can solve the issues. So, but you can see there, my approach would be different than Ted's, but they both kind of end up in the same place eventually.
I would suggest that one of the things maybe I'm not hearing this in the question, but one of the things I think I'm hearing in the question is, how do I know I've picked the right SEO, or how do I find the right SEO? And I would suggest it's somebody who asks you lots of questions. If you go to an SEO and say, I'll get you more links, and that's like the first thing they say right off the bat, well, why? Why do they think that's the first thing they need to do? Where they say, we got to put more keywords on your page. Like, they should be asking you questions about your site. They should be asking you questions about your business, understanding your business and trying to understand, all right, well, what are you trying to do with the business? What makes you the most money? What's the most profitable? And if you find someone who asks you those kind of questions, you probably have a real problem solver. And that's what you really need with a good SEO, is a problem solver.
Let's see. Any recommendations for helping to rank higher up in Google Maps? Yeah, I have some general advice I use in my training, which is you need to get into Google Maps and actually see how it functions for the keywords that your client needs in their area. Because the features within Google Maps will change from keyword to keyword and location to location, and they'll change over time. So what's working today might not work in 2 weeks. And so if you're not actually in Google Maps running those keywords and seeing what kinds of features are in and out of play, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. And you need to look carefully, very carefully, at all of the categories you can assign to the business, as well as what we call the switches. Those are the tags that you can add to a business listing. They would be, for a restaurant, they would be things like lunch and beer. And for a bar, it might be karaoke. And for a plumber, it might be on-site services. And so those things are very important and can be situationally extremely important. And so there's a lot in there that you need to tinker with and find out. And so I would recommend that you run some searches for like things like quick lunch, beer, dogs allowed, Seattle. and go through and you go to the About tab on each result and you see what they have configured and you see who's got the best configuration, who forgot to configure everything. And it's kind of important. And he's saying, what do you mean by features exactly? You'll have to get in there and poke around because in my brain, I exactly spelled out the things I'm seeing with my eyes in the Google Maps results. Let's see. Thanks for your help, guys. So to dive a bit on my ecom site, I have a little over 600 index pages ranked for just over 1,000 keywords using Search Console and SEMrush, but my average ranking is 40, sorry. Well, I mean, you're in the game, so if you're ranking 40, quite often the problem is you're not tuned well enough on page. So normally more aggressive tuning is needed to be competitive, especially in ecom. If you go and look at Amazon, how many times they use like the keywords or the partial matches of the keywords on page, it's rather high. And so, I would do a comparison of how the top ranking people are using their exact matches and variations and start there.
Yeah, that's one of the things, but also a lot of times on ecom sites that people are building themselves, they'll have not a lot of links to those leaf node pages, those product pages. And so, all the links pretty much come into the home page, potentially the category pages. So there's not a lot powering them up. So sometimes you're right, it is on page. Sometimes it's also your off page game is insufficient to push you up there. So you kind of have to look at both. That's where a tool like Kora is really, really good in saying, where do you have the biggest differences between you and the sites on page one?
So, Lee, I think Eric is asking what you thought about my local SEO features answer. Did you have thoughts on that?
Well, as a general rule, I never agree with Ted on anything. So, no, I thought it's really, really good. Ted approached it from, what things that you're optimizing in the GMB. When I hear that question, I know that there's several things that go into local. So I don't understand, the specifics of the situation where you're looking at, okay, how do I rank over a broader area? Well, what area are you ranking over now? If you want to rank 200 miles in every direction, I would tell you that you're deluded. If you have a problem where you have a tremendous amount of competitors in every direction from you, it's going to make it hard to break out without doing one set of things. If you're not ranking in your own backyard, that's a different set of approaches that you have to take. So, it's kind of like my page isn't ranking. What do I need to do? Well, is it an on-page, is it an off-page thing? Is it a technical issue? I mean, all of those things are still in play in general. So there's not one playbook for local.
Derek goes on to say the average is 40 on Search Console. I have very few backlinks compared to competitors. Well, keep in mind that we generally don't care about the backlink and authority scores on the homepage of online retail stores. For example, I would compete against Amazon all the time and I'd win with as few as 25 referring domains. But that's because when you get to the product pages in Amazon, they're all goose eggs. They have no backlinks except for wildly popular products. So if you're not competing with the wildly popular products, you can often outrank them with almost nothing.
Yeah.
But additionally, you shouldn't be neglecting any category of ranking signal. If you're neglecting off-page SEO, if you're neglecting schema, if you're neglecting keyword density, stop doing that. Google is a diversity system, and neglecting categories of things is kind of your biggest problem. What do you think, Lee?
Hey, it's great. I would tell Derek if he wants to take this offline, he can reach out to me privately, and we can see if I can guide him in the right direction on that for his, because I know different SEOs that handle different things well, and so if we can identify what it is, I can kind of point you in the right direction to see who can help him.
Do you have any tips or thoughts on lead generation for a B2B SEO agency? Yeah, there are numerous methodologies for finding people with observable problems in search directly. So at several of the conferences I did last year, I showed people how to find infinite numbers of people with easy SEO problems to diagnose and fix using search itself, because you can search for the problems. And maybe I'll do a show on that at some point. But just know that, yeah, there are certain problems in SEO that you can find, you can screenshot, you can send a photo of the problem on their site to them saying, hey, if you need help fixing this, I'd be happy to help. Otherwise, send it to your SEO and have him fix it. But we're here to help if you need us. Boom. Another way to do it is with a tool like Kora, where you can pull things like the profile data, and you can do a search in an area for all the karaoke bars, and you can find all of the bars that forgot to set the karaoke switch. Now you know a very easy problem to fix, and you can reach out to them and you can say, hey, if you'd like us to do an audit and find any other misconfigured things in your profile, just let us know. We're happy to help, but we wanted to bring this issue to your attention because you're misconfigured for karaoke. And so that's another way to use like the data to build leads. Another way is to use something like Kora Lite, which can make a mini report for all of the search results in a keyword. And then you would host those with a marketing message at the top of them saying, hey, if you need any help fixing your page tuning, let us know. We'd be happy to help. You can put a video in there. And this is passive outreach. So when those businesses vanity search their domain names, they'll probably eventually see that page on page 2 or 3 or something and go, what the heck is this? And there it is with the marketing message, the SEO data, a little explainer video telling about your services. And now you got people contacting you instead of you contacting them. So there's a lot of techniques like that are really good. Lee, anything come to mind?
Yeah, and I know a lot of people that do some clever things, and you're looking for a problem to solve, and you don't have to go far, because one of the techniques, and it's been around, and there's been courses and software put out about it. Just go find people when you're searching in local, where you're looking at their things, and it says claim my listing. If they haven't claimed the listing, that's a good thing to outreach to them and let them know that bad things can happen. With an unclaimed listing, some bad actor could do bad things, and so you'll want to go do this. And by the way, if you need help with that or any other marketing, call us. You're just looking for a reason to contact. And if you do it the way like Ted was talking about, here's the problem, and you can have your SEO go and solve this, or you can reach out to us, is a great way because it's not pushy. You've already given value by pointing out that they have an issue that needs to be fixed.
Let's see. Eric says focus on specific industries, and we know people that do that focus on law firms or focus on plumbers. That's a common thing. And it's good because they often have a lot of similarity in their problems. And so it's good to understand the business and, what they can afford and what SEO means to them. Those are all good things. But do keep in mind that every client is usually going to have a different situation because they all have different strengths and weaknesses. And so you'll often find that you can't run a one-page audit and have it diagnose all of them. It takes a bit more than that, even when you specialize. Let's see. Let's see. Does that seem like a lack of backlinks issue? Yeah. So this was the person who was talking about their ecom was ranking number 40 on average. It's wondering if it seems like a lack of backlinks issue. It can be because Google is a diversity system. If you only focus on page, the algorithm gets burned out on page just for your page. And so at a certain point, the algorithm's going to say, hey, you're just doing the same thing over and over again, and I'm not going to give you more score for that. And that's where diversity comes into play, because when you have all that signal diversity, that same algorithm says, oh, they meet the signal diversity thing. We're not an applicable algorithm for this one. And you get away with crazy on-page stuff. And this is why some web pages can have ridiculous on-page and get away with it, and some can't. The difference is in that signal diversity. So if you've been neglecting off-page and doing tons of on-page, then absolutely off-page could be part of the solution.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one, because if I took a look at your page, let's say you're ranking number 40, and everybody from 1 to 39 has 200 to 2,000 backlinks, and you've got 2, that's a pretty good indication that, you have a deficit there that's, it's an off-page deficit. On the other hand, if I look at your page and you're number 40 and your keyword density on your page is 2% and everybody else is between 5 and 12, that's an on-page issue. And so you really need to do some measurements, use Core or something like that to do some measurements to see where you differ most from everybody that's ranking above you. And that tells you a little bit about what course of action you need to take.
So to give a
Lee, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just so like a very, very high level analysis you can perform yourself. When I approach an SEO, I always look at it from first technical content, then linking, and then there's user metrics. So the first thing I'll do is I'll take all my pages, run them through all the different Google tools, see what comes back. Does Google see your content? If you go through all the tools and okay, Google isn't giving me errors, it seems to see all my content, then I would agree. Yeah, good. Then the next step is then look at your content and say, are you using the keywords more or less than all your competitors? Do you have more content, less content? Do you have the co-occurring terms like we were just talking about? Then you can start looking at links. Just kind of walk up that ladder to find the problem. Because typically what I find is if you have a problem with content or you have a problem with technical, all the links in the world aren't going to help you. If you're blocking Googlebot from seeing your content, you can have perfectly optimized content. It's not going to help you. But also I've seen people that spend a lot of time trying to fix technical problems when no, you don't have a technical problem on your site. You need better optimization or you need more authority. So overworking one of those pillars isn't going to help you either.
Yeah, agreed.
So Lee, someone is asking, what is the best way to get in touch?
Skype. Test it all. That's my thing. I've been on Skype forever. So test it all is my thing. All one word, TESTITALL.
All right. And let's see, what factors do you look for when buying an expired domain? An example, trust flow, number of referring domains. The first thing I would do is I would go and look at Wayback Machine and see what was hosted on it. Because if it was hacked, if it was used for ransoming computers, or if it was used for software piracy, it could be scorched earth that'll never rank again. So you kind of want to look through its recent history and see if there's an indication as to why it was expired. The next thing you'd probably want to do is check for the trademark, because if it's a trademark thing and it's like a business, like a bank or something that went out of business, those assets could have value and they could have ownership. And in those cases, you can be sued for them later. And so you wouldn't want to get into that type of situation if it's like a defunct bank where it's likely to change ownership and has lawyers working it behind the scenes. But if it's something, different than that, something that can't be trademarked or something like that, then it's a different situation. Then typically I want to know how long has it had a website on it? How many years has it been discoverable by Google? Because that age is meaningful. The registration date on the who is information means nothing. I used to have thousands of domains that were registered in the 90s but never used, and those domains had zero extra advantage over a new domain. So the only age that matters is how long has it been in Google's ecosystem. And then another thing I like to do is I like to use search operators to say something to the effect of sites that mention the domain that aren't the domain. So the minus site, the domain name, because I want to find out how many places kind of reference the domain I'm going to buy according to Google. So if I see big numbers in that and good authority sites in that, I'm feeling really good about it because Google's aware of those backlinks still and in a context where they can report on them. If you get it back and it's nothing, then it might be in a penalized state if it's existed for a long time and has no public references according to Google. That sounds like a penalized state. And so those are the things, because you don't want to buy a worthless domain. You'd want to buy something that, first and foremost can rank today if you use it. And then ideally has backlinks out in the wild still that you can reclaim and put to use. What do you think, Lee?
I don't play enough in that space to have, any strong opinions. I have a lot of the friends that do, I've got some people that, run link building services and they'll buy expired domains to build up their network. And I have other people that use it for their own, private stuff. And they all have tips that they've shared that are very similar to what you have, on a foundational level. You want to make sure that you've got a good, solid domain to use. And then beyond that, everybody has opinions about different aspects of the domain and when you would want it and wouldn't want it. And like all SEO things, they disagree. So I don't have anything additionally to offer on that particular topic.
Okay. Let's see. And then Glenn is asking, I'm trying to use the entity checker from InLinks on some pages on our enterprise site. InLinks is being blocked. Is the robots.txt blocking the entity checker? Are there other free entity checkers? If they're robots compliant, it could be that, but it could also be other things. There are services like Cloudflare. There are security appliances and load balancers like Big IP from F5. All of these things can detect bots and block them dynamically. So there might be something more sophisticated at work there. Often we see that with, online stores will often block bots and things like that. So it might be a robots.txt thing, it might not. Um, and usually it's not, because robots.txt is kind of easy to thwart. It's if you're a good behaving bot, these are the things we'd like you to avoid. And bad behaving bots don't care about that. So usually whatever security measures are in place for bots tend to be more sophisticated than the robots.txt.
Mm.
You probably see a fair amount of this on the enterprise side. What do you guys do to handle bots?
Yeah, we have lots of things, and I was trying to think like, okay, what things could he check to see? It could be almost anything. So we block certain IP addresses. There are certain, if you come in and try to hit one of our sites with a specific user agent, but there's other parts to your request that don't jive. So for example, you come in saying a Google bot, but you're not coming from Mountain View. We don't do this, but or you're not coming, or you're not, you're not identifying yourself as a Google LLC, then we'll say, no, we don't trust you. So it can get really sophisticated. My quick guess would be it's the IP address. Um, that'd be my quick, your server folks may have some very restrictive rules on IPs or number of requests from an IP or something like that. That'd be my quick guess, but I don't know. One thing you can do to see is if you have Screaming Frog, take it and try hitting your own site with Screaming Frog and see what happens. Does it allow you to crawl your own site or not? If you mess around with the user agent a little bit, does it let you in or does it still not let you in? If you're getting blocked with Screaming Frog, no matter how you're trying to access, it's probably IP based. If you are sometimes allowed in based upon the user agent, then that means there's some kind of sophisticated role going on where it's trying to check and see who's actually coming and making this request. Is it really Google? Is it really, this person that says, is it really a mobile agent? Yeah.
I think that's a good one because I had a situation. It wasn't 2 weeks ago that I was looking at a site. Only had a couple hundred pages, so I just said, "Hey, Screaming Frog, go crawl this thing," and it was returning data. Then it got down to a certain point, and it said blocked, 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 blocked. So a certain number of requests from an IP triggered their mechanism to say, go away. And I think that's a great diagnostic because if you're going to get blocked to Screaming Frog crawling a few pages on an enterprise site, then yeah, it does lend credibility to it's an IP based issue.
So fun story. I've had folks I've been helping out in the past, and I tried crawling them with Kora, and I then looked at the Kora report. I'm like, well, no wonder they're not ranking. There's zeros for everything. I'm like, wait a minute, there's not zeros for everything. They're blocking me.
A good general rule, though, if you're having trouble with inlinks, contact inlinks. They can tell you the most common issues their users have, and you can start with there.
Boom, tip of the day.
Terry with the voice of reason. All right, Terry, go directly to the source. Fine.
Last two questions. Hey guys, working as an SEO at an agency managing 10 client sites. Currently, there's no backlink strategy. With only one person doing SEO, is there a specific strategy you would recommend? And then outsource? Question mark. First of all, one person doing SEO on 10 sites simultaneously sounds like a lot to me. I know that when I was doing client SEO, I would start to drop the ball after 5 clients. And that might have been because I was doing too much per client. So it kind of depends what your SEO service is. But 10 feels like a lot for one person to manage successfully, and having them all be super excited about what they got. So for the backlink strategy, you'd probably have to keep it really simple. You'd probably have to do what I often do, which is rely heavily on press releases and use a referring domain strategy. That's a good way to go because it's generally white hat if you do it properly. It's gotten good results for me. So there may be some art in how you do it. So it'd be something you'd have to tinker with and learn. Other than that, I'm really kind of not big on like guest posts and niche edits because often those things are far too expensive on a per link basis. So it doesn't make sense to spend money that way to get to where you need to be. So you'd have to run the math on whatever strategies you think you're going to suggest and figure out if they financially make sense. Outsourcing is a possibility, but it requires a great deal of trust. And so the question I would have is, do you trust anyone you could outsource to that much? What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, this is a hard one because there's no one strategy for, for the first part of it, and not all strategies are effective. So, I love press releases like you do, but there are press release networks out there that are crap and can actually harm your site. So, you can't just blanket, oh, press releases or, niche edits or this outreach. Some things can do, some of that's effective, some of it isn't. Largely it depends on who's doing it and how they're doing it. And you're always looking at the trade-off between time and money to create the links and execute it, whether it's you, a VA, or a separate agency or separate tool. So there's no one way. I'm not sure because my answer would change depending on whether your 10 clients were all small local plumbers or your 10 clients were all enterprise e-commerce sites. And that plays into it as well. So I don't have an easy answer for this one.
It sounds like the agency doesn't have systems set up. So
Mm-hmm.
years ago, I worked for a company called LexisNexis. All the clients were small, medium-sized law firms, and we built out a system. Month one, we did this. Month two, we did this. Month three, we did this. And then we eventually got to a month that we started doing link building. But the way our system was built is once we started getting the results, we could stop. We didn't have to keep doing more stuff. Once you're ranking, number one, number two, you don't have to keep, doing stuff, doing stuff constantly. So I don't know, whoever asked this question probably does not have the authority or power to change the system, but I would suggest trying to create systems internally. If you're working at a reasonably sized agency, they're looking for people to take charge probably. And then this would be a great place for you to take charge, saying, okay, we need to do this, then we need to do this, then we need to do this, and then start coming up with strategies for how to link build.
Good advice. All right, last question. Does it matter if you redirect an entire expired domain to the home page, or should it be to another internal page? My advice there is to an internal page. When you redirect to the home page, there is a possibility that either now or in the future that Google could treat that as a soft 404, and that would be catastrophic to what you're hoping to do. But when you're redirecting to an inner page, that's more intentional than a home page, and that appears to be the safe way to handle it. And so that's my read. I know there's people that disagree and say I get away with the homepage all the time. I just don't think it's the safest bet. But you're welcome. You're welcome to experiment. We encourage that. Lee, any thoughts?
Oh yeah, I love this because at its core, you're asking more or less about a site migration, and the guy that I know that does site migrations really, really, really freaking well is Charles. So Charles, What would you do, man?
Don't do a site migration. No. That's the
Just say
best site
no.
migration.
Don't purchase it.
The best site migration you could ever do is the one you don't have to do. So yeah, it's well, the problem with migrations, and actually it's interesting, you'll see it in the Google leak. Google has a thing they call a Muppet, and it's one of the ways they store, hey, this is with this URL, and part of it is the URL. So they understand the entire web based on URLs. The moment you change your URLs, you're changing fundamentally how Google understands what your website is, and it causes all kinds of trouble. So if you can migrate without changing your URL structure, that is the best way to do it. I have yet to see a system, and I know Lee, you and I and Honey have talked about how she's seen situations where people change templates and hurts the SEO. I have yet to see a scenario, at least in all the sites I've dealt with, where changing the site but not changing the URL structure hurt anybody. But with that said, we've always gone from a poorer optimized site to a better optimized site. So when you're doing that, you probably always have the deck stacked in your favor. I could spend a long time talking about migrations. I won't. It's the secret's to the URLs. The more you're changing URLs, the greater risk you're putting yourself at. And you've got to allow Google to discover the new URLs. You can't force feed them to Google.
Yeah, so if you're buying, like this person is, buying an expired domain and redirecting it, a site redirect to the home page, to an inner page, or would you go with strategy C, none of the above?
So yeah, I would do first none of the above. What I would do first is I'd set up a test, couple pages, and then redirect the site to one of these pages and see what happens to the page. Does the rank go up or down? That's your first way, because getting away with something is not like, hey, I could always get away with this. That's a bad SEO. It's just a bad strategy in life in general, like what you think you can get away with. Just test it. If you redirect this domain to the specific page and that page drops, there could be a problem with the domain, and there could be a problem that you may not ever see. You can do as much diagnostic checking as you want. You may not ever see it. In general, what I would do is, it depends on what your goal is, but my guess is you're buying a domain and you want to you live off that. I would try to depending on how old it is, I would try to reutilize the old URL structure. But you also have to make sure that your page is reasonably optimized about this. It has to be the same subject as the old one. So you can't take a page, dog-training.html and then make it about apple pie. That's not going to fly with Google. All the links that you're getting, you might as well just get your own domain. So we've been talking about buying domains. I wasn't going to say this, but I will say this since I've got the talking stick right now. Personally, I don't buy any used domains. I've decided a while ago that there are people a lot smarter than me, like Ted, like Terry, like Lee, who are watching this stuff constantly, who've developed their own programs, and I'm not going to pull one over on them. They're going to get all the good stuff before I even know the good stuff is available. So I typically just come up with my own domains. But that said, I've spoken to many people who say, oh, yeah, I bought a domain, and they tell me how great the site's doing, and that's cool. But I wouldn't, I don't personally mess with domains. If you were going to redo the URL structure and make sure that their topics are the same as their topics, that's the best course of action for doing it.
Yeah, I really like the advice of test it first, because it's totally true. In the past, I've seen business owners speculate on domains, point them at their website, and watch their rankings fall. So it's really good to test them for a few weeks, ideally, 2-3 months, see what they do. So set up a $5 test website, rank it for an easy keyword, and then when you speculate on a domain, point it there for a while, see if it does damage. All right, guys, just a reminder, Google has a web spam update. You never know what you get from those. Historically, they have largely been about backlinks. So just keep in mind that that's happening, and, we'll see what happens. We'll probably talk about it in the future. All right, take care, everyone. See you next time.